Dan, can you hear us? Okay,
Yeah, Mayor, I can hear you just fine.
we can hear you too. Sounds great. Right now, Jack. Sorry. All right. Smithville Board of Aldermen work session is now called to order. Continuation from our board retreat. Ms. Wagner?
That's correct.
All yours.
We didn't get through all the information on the agenda at the board retreat, so we're going to present that information this evening. We did talk some about the utilities. We want to go through that information again, make sure the board understands that and have an opportunity to provide that information in the public then as well. So this is, I think the utilities section is, Rick, you start and then we turn over to Chuck. Is that correct?
I'm gonna go until
Can't figure anything. What's going on?
All right. I'm turning it over to staff for the information that they prepared for the retreat.
I think I'm on. Yep. Good. All right. Some of these slides that we're going to go through tonight are some of the repeat slides that we did talk about a little bit at the retreat. We're just kind of rushed there at the end, so we thought it would be a good idea to kind of look at these again real quick. So looking at the combined water and wastewater systems fund. And of course, I already have mouse problems. No, that's her doing it. Perfect. All right. This is the first slide that we talked about at the retreat. Just we wanted to rehash some of the status of what we're at with the utility fund. So we've made the decision early this year not to sell the utilities. We have been talking every meeting about the aging infrastructure and how costly it is to maintain. Project costs continue to increase. We see this every week. Chuck and I meet constantly going over projects, engineering costs, as well as just construction costs is constantly increasing. Project timing is fluid, and this is based on development needs and growth. Project engineering, planning, and coordination is very time consuming. So the earlier we can get started on some of these projects, the quicker we can get to the construction, obviously. Recent maintenance projects have reduced emergency expenditures. We saw some of this, such as the slip line, how it kind of cut down on our time and cost. Debt financing will be required to do everything that needs to be done within the next 9 to 10 years. And rate increases will be required. Staff is trying to minimize that impact, but having system enhancements will require rate increases. This is one topic that we kind of started talking about, doing another rate study. That's still open on the table. We talked about even starting this year and getting that started and seeing how close they can get it done before the end of this fiscal year, so we could have the rate study to back up any kind of rate changes that we do going forward.
Rick, I'm going to jump in for 1 second too, just as a little bit more background that the board is aware of, but we want to make sure that we highlight the projects that are included in the water and wastewater master plans are included in the CIP and are included in those rate models and are why we're looking at multi-million dollars over the next several years. We've discussed that over the last several months. Just want to remind the board, but also the public, that these are projects that as far back as 2018 have been identified as needs in the water and wastewater master plans. And then we've talked about rate increases. We've talked about those since 2019 after we had our initial rate study done. And not all of the recommendations of that rate study were implemented. So that has an impact as well. So just that reminder, and keep that in mind as we continue through the information here. And Rick's comment about discussion of a need for a rate study, we will, as we talk through this is a little different information than was provided at the retreat because we've had some internal discussions based on some feedback from the board and maybe moving forward in a little different way in that review, as Rick alluded to.
Well, I think going back even further than that, since Jack and Tony are probably the few here, one of the main reasons Steve Garrett was hired is because that was his expertise and it continues to be his expertise. And he was hired in 12, 10. So this has been discussed well beyond that. And we adopted the water master plan and sewer master plan, but those things were discussed for decades.
Yeah, and the work on those started significantly before that, and those discussions have been ongoing, correct?
Yep.
All right, moving on to the next slide here. We have a list of the capital projects under the operations of the Combined Water and Wastewater Fund. As we kind of talked about in the retreat, but I'll reiterate here, anything that I've highlighted are changes to what we've already shown. With that first change with the west bypass of the 144th Street lift station, that has increased in cost by $1 million. And then the water plant improvement construction, all of that is planned on getting done in fiscal 25. I don't know if Chuck, do you want to chime in on any of those other ones or any of those two that have had changes?
Maybe just give you a brief
Sorry.
status of where we're at with 144th Street. We are actually having our pre-construction meeting on Friday this week, and then we will have notice to proceed on the 19th. So that project's getting moving. And then the water plant improvement project continues to move forward. Right now, they've replaced several of the valves in the filter gallery. They've got a few more to do, and then the filter media is out there, and then we'll start working on that. So the other projects, as far as, we've been talking about the big four, got final easements for our river crossing, so should have that wrapped up in the next couple weeks. And then HDR had mentioned to me that they were gonna submit to DNR, so month, maybe we'll have that out to bid, the river crossing in Smith Fork. And then we've got some other discussions happening Thursday on Stonebridge with another potential development, but plans are close right now, so we gotta see what this may change for that. So, those were the big projects that we've been talking about this year, so we're trying to get those going.
So Chuck, sorry, I didn't get
Yep.
to meet with you ahead of time, and I don't know if you guys heard from him too, but I know part of 144th Street's being funded through Congress, through the Corps.
Yes,
I did hear from Congressman's office late yesterday that we did not make it into appropriations for this next budget, but hopefully in the future,
keep trying.
keep trying.
Keep trying.
So we are continuing to push through with the federal grants and things too, so.
But a reminder that we do have federal funding for the 144th Street station.
That's signed. That's signed and going. Thank you, Congressman Graves.
All right, next slide is showing a cash flow projection. This is, again, what we've been showing since February of this year. So again, just to reiterate, some changes that have been made on the debt issuance line. That first debt issuance in 2025, that was increased 500,000. Then also the flip side of that one is the expense, which was increased $1 million, and that's the 144th Street. And then all of the projections that we've shown to date, and this is just a reminder, we have shown with the sliding interest rate or utility rate going down to 10% and then holding at 10%. So to date, all these projections, 15% was 25, and then starting to go down 1% until we hit 10% and holding steady at 10%. With this projection, we hit in 2029, we would hit negative, well, we want to hit negative cash, but we'd go below our reserve. So at 29 would be our point with this scenario. Going to the next slide here, this is the slide that we show 15% in 25, and then going to 10% and holding steady at 10%. Again, we are We are running into trouble in 29. That would produce a negative cash and it obviously hit our reserve as well. In one more scenario, we have the 5%. This is when we would hit our trouble in 28. And this would be hitting the reserve in 28. And if you remember, right at the end of the retreat, I ran it at 0%, and that was taking us down to like 250,000. And that was still in 28 though.
Can you just go back to that slide for just 1 second? I'm checking something. So just as a reminder, these are projections, and that's why we have these meetings, so we can adjust. And I'm looking at the CI, 5-year forecast for CIP for 2021, which Rick, you weren't here for. But 2025, it showed cash on hand is going to be negative 7 million. So I think we're about $17 million difference from.
And that was
That projection.
anticipating
Yeah.
the 144th Street
Yeah.
project being completed.
So this is
This
a
is why it's
moving,
fluid.
moving fluid scale chart. Doesn't mean we're going to be.
Interesting to note.
Yeah. Just a few years ago.
All right, I think this was kind of where we were wrapping up our retreat here. This revenue scenario is that first one that's at 79 million. That is our current scenario. That is with our decreasing down to 10% and then holding steady at 10%. So the projected revenue through 2033 would be just shy of $80 million. So if we decrease that to the 10% and hold them steady at 10%, we lose about 3.3 million in revenue, taking us down to 76 million. If we would go down to 5%, this is where we see kind of a big jump here, we'd be just under 11.5% or 11.5 million and at $68 million in revenue. So what does that affect? That affects a lot of these smaller projects that I have listed here. Right now I have listed 675,000 of these smaller projects that this type of revenue for the water department covers. I have that last one kind of open that's kind of been going back and forth. That could easily add 150,000 to this bottom line. So hitting 825,000. So taking the rate decreases obviously takes away a little bit of the revenue, and that revenue helps out with some of these smaller projects that we want at bond. So just a quick scenario, just a quick review of what that would do. And this is, of course, is just 26. These smaller projects are kind of a year in advance, sometimes come up in an emergency. So this is just 26, looking at 26. All right. We did leave this slide in here, looking for any kind of direction, discussion that you'd want to have on rate increases and expenditure priorities. We haven't got into the high level, high dollar CIP projects yet. But if you wanted to have any kind of discussion that would guide us in rates, that would be great. We can hold off. Up to you guys.
I think also, as Rick has alluded to at the staff level, we've had some discussions since the retreat that it might make some sense to, the lowest projection we have is trying to roll back those increases to rates to 5%. It causes some issues in funding projects. At the retreat, we talked about tolerance for increases. It is not fun to recommend the level of increases we're looking at. And we know it's not fun to make those decisions about that. We don't want to have to do that. But you look at the projects that Rick outlined, $675,000 worth of projects in 26, that doesn't sound like a lot. It has a significant impact on the system. And that's just the cash funded programs. We would also need to just ensure that we had cash moving forward to be able to fund projects, because if we don't have the rates to cover the debt needs, we wouldn't be able to do some of those larger projects down the line either. One of the conversations we've had internally is we talked about the need for a reboot or a review of the rate study. As we said, the last rate study was done in 2022. Perhaps bringing someone in from the outside to take a look at our capital plan, our rates as they are, and looking at our systems from the financial perspective there, and looking at our CIP, looking at our water and wastewater master plan, and making recommendations as to what rate increases should be, would help us understand that a little bit better and have someone else come in. The problem that staff had in talking about doing rolling back to a 5% increase or even just a 10% increase, that sounds flip almost. It's not meant in that way. We might conduct a rate study, and because we don't implement large enough increases, we might be looking at significantly higher increases in a following year. I think at this point in time, staff's thought as a recommendation would be that we proceed with a rate study sooner rather than later as part of this year's review. And that, we issue an RFQ sooner rather than later, get started on that process, have that information back maybe even by the end of the calendar year, so that we wouldn't make recommendations as we finalize the fiscal 26 budget year.
One second.
But that,
we need to find out. We need to meet some folks.
we want to make sure that everybody mutes themselves so that we don't have that feedback.
Fine, okay. They muted themselves.
Okay.
Thank you.
So staff's discussion at this point in time would be to recommend to the board that we move forward with a rate study. And as we develop the 26 budget, perhaps not adopt rates until we have that rate study in hand, till we know that an outside entity has looked at our expenditures, looked at those projections, and made an outside recommendation with regard to those necessary increases. And we could have some additional discussion on those priorities if need be.
I think that's a smart decision.
Yes.
That's it really not being an option. Let's have the right facts and figures.
Yeah. In the scope of work of the rate study, make sure we see what the rates would look like if we're not supplying to outside entities. Because I know we talked to John, it was John Davis said they're looking at connecting into the county. Because they have the water line runs under the lake that leaked. So that might be, it'll impact our production. And there's other ones that we want to, that possibly might leave in our system that might impact production, that we don't have to spend as much on the production side of things. The wastewater side, I don't think it's going to change much, but the production side of things might change. Dave, sorry.
Mayor,
We're gonna have to
yeah,
go with everybody's stuff.
Mayor, I agree with Alderman Atkins. I believe that it is necessary. And just so I think for those who are tuning in, understand this weighs heavy on all of us as a board on trying to figure out how to pay for these projects. This isn't something that we just make a decision and say, hey, we're going to go ahead and raise rates. There's a reason behind this. And I think a rate study, Cynthia, would be the right thing. Obviously, I'd like to hear the rest of the board, but I'm in agreement with that.
Yeah, sounds good.
I agree. To make the best decision,
Yeah.
we need more information.
Yeah, and Chuck, I think anytime there's significant economic change, we should look at doing a rate study. So, we did one post-COVID because of that. And now we got another bogey out there, so.
I think,
Yeah, go ahead.
go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, Alderman Russell, that I think one of the questions that someone had asked of what that cost is, and that's what an RFQ is for. We can't predetermine that. So I just want to make sure that everyone understands that's why we would do a request for a quote on that. Am I correct, Cynthia?
That's correct. I believe last time we've done those for between $25,000 and $30,000, I think, so.
Yeah, but yeah, like you said, we don't know because we go based off
We-
qualifications. We don't see the price until we've picked the most qualified bidder. If they're way out of budget, we
Based
can-
on that scope of work, and when we talk about
Yeah.
these items, we want the firm that would best comply with that scope of work that we outline. And we normally also, on all of our RFQs, have a review committee that typically involves board members in that review as well.
Yep.
For selection.
For anybody who hasn't done one yet, let me know. I'll put you on it so you can do one.
I think in addition to the rate study, I'll probably ought to tie it into some type of a project study to see that, what projects that we're doing to make sure that they are in line with, that we need them, that we have to have them, that they're in line with the rate study. And the reason why I say that is because if we just go and say, here's what we want to do, and we just want you to show us how much money we need to get, that's what we've been doing. I think we need to look at it, my personal opinion, we need to look at it from a different perspective, maybe on the amount of money we plan on spending per year and see what that would do as far as, to the rates over extended period of time, like flatline the curve, I guess is what I'm saying. So say we're going to spend $3 million a year for 10 years or something, instead of saying we're going to spend 7 million this year, 9 million this year, and look at what that would do as far as to the rates. Because it's what we're doing now is just continuing to put it on the backs of taxpayers. And I don't know about the other aldermen. My phone has been going, this is the number one issue that I've been getting calls about. So it's something that's important. I think that if we have to do it, we need to make sure that all due diligence is done so we can show that to the taxpayer.
I want to
Just
make sure,
clarification, it's not taxpayers, it's ratepayers, because there's many,
Oh,
there's people on our system that do
And-
not live in city limits,
Thank
that do
you.
not pay taxes.
and to make
But,
sure
but also
taxes,
we can't build half a pump station.
Thank you, Mayor, for
We
clarifying
can't
that.
build half a filter.
right.
We can't build half a detention basin.
No, we can't, but what we can do is we can build half of it at the end of the fiscal year and half of it at the beginning of the next fiscal year.
Many of our projects do overlap. That's why we have budget amendments, because we pay the bills the
Right.
following year.
Yeah, we can't get it all completed in 1 year.
I don't think we've
typically.
ever had a big project finish in the
Mm-mm.
fiscal year, and we constantly do budget amendments, which you continue to question as well. That's why we have to do it that way, because we don't have encumbrances in our system.
Two things also, Mayor's clarification about ratepayers versus taxpayers.
Yep.
And no tax funds support the water and wastewater system. It is all rate driven.
Right, that's my fault for
Well,
saying that.
we
I-
just
I
want to
meant-
make sure that everybody, because that is
There
a
are-
common
And there are some
misconception.
entities like the Public Water Supply District who pay a wholesale rate, which is significantly lower than what you pay at your house.
And that's something
And
that
that
we
is
need to
more
be looking
unfair,
at.
in my opinion, than, going up 5%.
I also do want to clarify, those projects that we've looked at aren't just haphazard. Those are based on the water and sewer master plans that we've identified as project needs over the next 30 years in the city. And it's based on growth and development in the community.
Chuck, can we please set
Um,
up a work session to review
yep.
the water master plan and sewer master plan again?
And
And bring HDR
If,
in?
I was gonna say, if we need to have HDR in here and maybe we do a bit of a reboot and work with them on, this is population driven and it's based on the needs that we've got. We've had a number of discussions about projects on the north end of town to support that growth. And the advantages of growth and then the impact it has. So we can absolutely schedule another work session to look at.
And
that-
also there's
the
building code
master
changes and all
plans.
sorts of things.
Absolutely.
But we also don't stop construction of a house midway through because of budget overruns or else it doesn't get finished. We've had a few houses in town that don't get finished because of things like that, but yeah, Chuck, if we can go through that, I mean, we spent lots of money on those plans and everybody.
Well,
on
we've
board
made
at the
pretty
time
significant
got-
progress in them as well.
Yeah.
And there's
Yeah.
still a lot of work to be done. And so we can provide that update as to where we are and what
I
remains.
think everybody or most of the people on the board have a hard copy of those, so flip through them,
Yeah.
read the,
We do, and like the mayor mentioned, we have approved them in the past, and since we're going to looking at these again, I think it's a great idea to, look at the impact that it's having to everything, right, as a whole, future, right, the now,
hey
look at it
Dave,
from
you
a
had to do
different
any less
perspective.
pump station work lately?
No less.
Okay. Gravity's probably the way to go. Okay. The guy who deals with it every day, I trust his opinion.
And Mayor, to your point also about most of the board members have copies of those master plans. Those are also online.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone can review those.
It's hard to zoom in on that map on my phone.
I know.
It folds out nice and long. Chuck, are we down below 30 pump stations yet? Okay, well. Getting close.
There's a couple of projects that Rick was gonna throw away if we don't get enough money,
Mhm.
but they would take care of a couple, three of them, so we will get down below 30.
There we go. Gravity. Quit pumping it everywhere.
I'm also, as we get ready to transition in the next discussion, I think a rate study would help in our review of the next item we're going to discuss, and that's impact fees.
Do you guys have that chart that shows that Johnson County impact fees?
We don't have it in this one.
Yeah, just when we get there, check, going in that number handy for, what was it, Olathe that's like 25 grand now?
Yeah.
27 grand? Real P?
All right. Chuck did at the retreat start talking about impact fees. I'm gonna go through these slides and then Chuck will chime in here as needed. So again, the purpose of the impact fees is to collect revenues from the developers to offset expansion of our infrastructure. The current structure doesn't accurately reflect the water and wastewater impacts to the system. So staff is recommending a change in structure for impact fees based on flow. And then we will also look at possible increases later on at impact fees.
So when you're talking flow, you're talking actual usage or size of valve? 'Cause I
Flow
know,
based on size.
okay, because I know like commercial requires flow for fire suppression, but they might not necessarily be a bigger user impact wise.
If they get a separate meter for their fire, well, they don't even meter for their fire suppression systems. But yes, what we're talking about is the capacity of water that you can run through a 3/4 inch versus a 1 inch versus a 2 inch.
Right.
Currently, and this may flip to the next slide or two. I'm jumping ahead. Rick.
On the revenue?
You want,
One to the.
one more.
Yeah, there we go.
So currently, whether you have a 3/4 or 1 inch meter, you're paying $3,100 for impact fee. But a 3/4 inch meter will run 23 gallons a minute and a 1 inch meter will run 37 gallons a minute. So.
How much is the actual meter too? It's significantly more expensive, right?
And not the 3/4 to 1 inch.
Well, I
isn't
mean, when
that
we
much
get up
different.
to these bigger
When you get
ones.
up to the other sizes, yes, they're significantly more and they go up a lot more. But based on the flow, and those are where we have most of our meters is the 3/4 and 1 inch. But based on flow, you can get 1.6 times as much water out of an inch meter that you can out of a 3/4 inch meter. And what we're seeing is some of these multifamily developments are opting for a 1 inch meter, which costs the same as a 3/4, but they can serve 2, 3, even 4 residences.
Right.
So at least if we split that so that your 3/4 inch is your base, basically a residential home. If a developer wants to serve 2 homes off of a 1 inch line, that's great, but they should pay more than just the 3/4 inch. So the proposed fees are basically based on how much water you can actually get, whether you turn the faucet on or not. I mean, but you can, a 6 inch line will run, hold on a second, I got the number here. It runs a lot more water than you think. 1,100 gallons a minute.
Do we have any private entities that are on a 6 inch right now? Or are they all public entities?
We have 2.
They're
You know
both,
what?
one is the Clay County Parks, the other one's a school district, right? Yeah, I think it's the high school campus.
So we don't, I mean, they're already in. I mean, you'd have to have a pretty big industry that would want
Yeah.
a 6 inch meter.
But the ones we do have in existence today, they wouldn't be impacted by this. They're
No,
just on
because
their-
they're already in. This would just be for
But if
new
they go to build
development.
another high school, we might, that's where that conversation might have to be had with,
The high school's got their own line, 8-inch line that runs around the school that they tie off of.
no, I say if they build a new,
Oh, a new one.
if they build, it's in their master plan years out to build a second
Okay,
high school.
and we'll have to just see where that goes, but,
Yeah.
anyway, that would be what we would propose. It's similar for wastewater. You know, based on your meter size, your impact fee, cause when you think about it, you know, there's not much water that just gets wasted. You drink some and the rest of the water goes into the sewer, plus other things.
Or you water your garden.
So, when they did that, last study, they didn't increase the wastewater impact fees at all. And that hasn't been increased, and I couldn't even find any increases, and Jack doesn't think they were increased, have ever been
There's
increased.
the one right after Harbor View was, or Harbor Lakes was built
And
in that
so,
timeline.
and the same thing with the water impact fees, and we had the or the rate study done in 22, and they haven't increased, but our costs increase every year. The parts, and everything else, the impact, these construction projects are increasing every year. Just since the last rate study, we're behind, at least if you just use 3% for 3 years, we're behind 9% on these. That doesn't make a lot of difference, but really, these impact fees should be increased, whether it's a CPI or whatever, cost of living, whatever you want to do, every year. Just once we get, after we do the new rate study. But I would suggest we go ahead and at least get those two separated as soon as possible,
Sounds, works for me.
based on the flow. And then, when the rate study comes in, they say, oh, it shouldn't have been 3,100, it should be 3,000. We can change that, but right now we've got a lot of development going on, multifamily. They're all gonna come in for $3,100, and they're gonna serve a lot of properties. So if we adjust that, they can make the decision. They can use the 3/4 inch, or they can use the 1 inch. Still a little savings, but it's the amount of water that goes through there is what we need to look at.
And 5/8 is, that's just old stuff that we're not.
We're not really doing that.
Yeah.
On their side. So so that's kind of that discussion point.
Like, do we want to try to get direction on that discussion point so we could maybe move forward?
I'd say
If-
go for it. but-
So,
I say
and
go
that's
for it.
something that we would bring to the board sooner rather than later, just as
Yeah.
a separate discussion and adjustment to the schedule of fees.
Yeah, don't we do schedule of fees in July, August anyway? So.
We look at it and then generally we adopt it with the budget, but we would look at it, we sometimes make changes to it throughout the year, and I would recommend that this be something that we look at and make that adjustment sooner rather than later. Bring
for it.
something forward in the next several meetings.
Chuck, a quick question for you. Looking towards adopting this recommendation from you to the board, anybody that's already in progress, construction as pull permits would not be affected. This would be net new permits, correct? Once this was, I guess, agreed
Jack's
upon.
nodding his head yes, if you're not seeing it on the camera.
Yeah.
Yeah, if
Okay.
they've already pulled their permit and paid their impact fee, we wouldn't go back.
Yeah, this
No,
would
I
only
get
be for
that. I
those
just
who are
want to
not
be
permitted.
clear. Yeah. Just want to be clear that anything moving forward would be net new permits pulled.
Right.
And this is per meter, right? So like if they're gonna, service 30 units in a building and they pull 1 meter, that's still just 1 meter.
Right.
That's, and if they're running 30, if it's an apartment complex that has 30 units in a 3-inch meter, they're still significantly lower than paying for 30 meters.
Right.
So makes sense.
Yeah, if it was an apartment building of 30 and they, you serve 3/4 inch times 30 is $90,000 versus what, 37 if
Yeah.
it's a 3-inch.
Or even if they do a 4-inch, they're still significantly lower.
Mhm.
And that will help with, I think that'll help with some of the flow issues we hear complaints about too on multifamily.
Yeah, possibly. And, we really don't have that much. We have, I think I said 48 2 inches last time, so there's not a lot that go over.
I know a
commercial-
few of those are Greyhawk and places that have wanted more capacity. because they all showed up when we did the last one of these, and it was churches, couple houses. I know Good Shepherd showed up and some of the other churches, so. And there, it's also the distance from the road that they are too, was why some of them had a 2-inch. There's a house on 180th Street that has a 2-inch, I think, so.
I have an inch and a half, so that's a big line, but it's a
Yeah,
quarter mile down the road
yeah,
before I get
because
my
you
meter.
you can't run it through a garden hose.
Yeah. So,
Makes sense.
okay.
Might not get there. No laundry. Yeah. Trickled.
And we can go just to the next one. So looking at this slide, this is what our projections are in orange there for this year for waste or for water and wastewater impact revenue. If we did the revised fees that Chuck just talked about, it would there be in that dark blue line. This isn't a make it or break it type fund, but it at least gets us to what's actually going through the meters flow wise.
I guess to Dan's point, it really would make a difference when we start those fees, because people are pulling permits all the time, so.
Right.
Yeah.
And Chuck, the mayor mentioned earlier that you have the chart or the graphic comparison to Kansas City.
I got the numbers.
Like to.
Oh, Kansas City's is low. I was talking
it?
Yes, I think.
Lee
I think
Summit
they
and,
are.
was it Overland Park that are in the 20,000s, I think?
Yes.
Wow.
Well, compared to those two.
When I'm looking at the proposed fees, Liberty would be comparable. Olathe is like double what we're proposing. Lee Summit, they're comparable. They don't even have, they don't list anything for 3, 4, and 6-inch. That's basically to be determined, they figure.
Share what Overland Park or Olathe would be.
I don't have Overland Park, but I have
Olathe.
Olathe. So Olathe for 5/8, let me make sure I'm getting this right here. For 3/4 would be 5,300. For a 1-inch, it would be 13,000. And I'm rounding these. For 2 inches, 43,000. 3 inches, 80. When you get up to 6, it's 267,000. So Johnson County's similar,
Yeah,
a
that's the
little
other
bit
one.
lower.
Unincorporated Johnson County.
Raymore would be similar to what we're proposing. So Liberty, Raymore, Lee Summit.
What's Liberty at a 2-inch?
Liberty at a 2-inch would be 11. So we'd be a little bit higher than that, but. So we can get all this in a.
Thank you.
report for you.
Thank you, Chuck.
Yep.
Right.
So I think one, before you move on, Rick, just to summarize, we will bring forward then to the board information. Do you want us to have additional information or just bring it forward as a change for the recommendations here? And we'll include the comparison in that.
I think we should go
Back
ahead
then.
and go for it myself, but I don't know what the rest.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, we will do
Bring it
that.
forward.
Perfect.
All right. Looking at trash, our contract is with Green for Life. This ends October 2026. As of right now, our contract increase for next year for 2026 is 1.7%. And I just want to make note, Myra's worked really hard on this and they initially came, I want to say 4.3, 4.4. And she was able to talk them down to the 1.7. In addition to that 1.7, they've also indicated if we would extend another year with GFL, that they would hold true to that 1.7 for 2027.
Oh, smart.
So that is up for discussion here. So also in there, we just show the price increases with this 1.17% change. Regular customer would go from 2050 to 2085. The senior rate would go from 1743 to 1773. And then this will be obviously discussed with the schedule of fees later on this summer.
quick comment?
Yep.
So, just to let you know, the contract with GFL does expire in 26. We have to let them know if we're going to go out to bid or to continue with them by February 26. So that's why they proposed this 1.7 for 27, which would push it off a year. It does allow, the contract does allow us to add additional years. So if we want to do that, we need to let them know formally, or we need to let them know the other way by February. Myra is putting together, and she'll bring that back at some point, what everybody else is doing. Sounds like we've got a pretty good deal as compared to Parkville. And then if there's any other additional services, and I really can't think of any more that the board may want,
We just
you
do
know.
shredded every weekend. Bulk, can we get a bulk trash dumpster every week? Because I mean, the curbs are pretty full right now when you
I
drive
mean,
neighborhoods.
they provide a lot of service, and in the memo that Myra put together, I mean, it's all listed there, so but if you
Yeah.
can think of anything else, let
I-
us know, we can talk to
I
them.
can tell, I don't know if anybody else has paid a commercial trash bill lately, but 1.7 is very reasonable, in my opinion.
My recommendation is move forward because what's the chance if we don't do this, it could be 4 or 5% increase the next year.
Or
We can lock it in at
double.
1.7 or 20, right? Yeah.
I think some people's commercial just doubled, so.
Mhm. Mine did.
I concur with Alderman Kabowski. Yes. Let's go ahead and let him know.
Lock it in, we'll bring back a resolution for the board's concurrence.
Sounds great.
Okay.
It's like Verizon, you can lock it in for 3 years now. Just
We'll talk
See what
to
we can
Tom.
do.
We'll talk to Tom, we'll see. He might be in the mood to extend.
Can we
it
get, I
longer.
mean, if we get more cardboard, are they gonna keep it low for, you know? That dumpster up at Price Chopper is pretty full the other day. Again. Yeah, it's, trash prices are going up and up and up.
Maybe they need to provide each of us with a canister just for cardboard,
You gotta recycle, yeah,
you know, another recycle.
there we go. What color lid are you gonna put on that? Green and black stripe, do we know? I know, you can get multiple recycles for free. And you write cardboard on it in big letters. Melissa likes to shop.
All right, moving on.
Nice.
Capital improvement sales tax projects. Again, I'm gonna talk more on these highlighted ones. You've seen where these projects are at in the past 6, 7, 8 months. These highlighted projects are changes that we've made subsequent to that, should be known here. So the first one is the First and Bridge Street roundabout. That has decreased to a 50% sharing, and we'll see the other 50%, I believe, in transportation. But that cost, just like we were talking when I opened up, that cost is increasing, and that increased to 220,000 at 50%. Originally, that was at 100,000. That second line was also in engineering. We consolidated it with the one above it. Obviously, that had a little bit, but that was a very low impact to that price doubling there. And then the other thing that has happened there is the 2 projects that have moved to 26 and 27. First off, you have the Second Creek sidewalks. That is moved from 25 to 26. And then the Riverwalk and trail construction, that has moved from 25, and it will probably take a couple years to finish 26 and 27.
Hey,
Are we
Rick,
doing the engineering on those together?
They are, yes. GBA is doing both the projects as one project, but because we got 2 separate grants, we'll probably bid them. I don't know if MoDOT will allow us to tie them and pick one contractor. We'll have to see how that goes, but you know, we've just got a weird calendar year. We probably will have these projects bid, but this is construction dollars.
Right.
We won't expend any construction dollars probably until 26 because we just got a different
Because our
calendar
26 starts in
year.
November, our 26 starts in November and MoDOT starts, is theirs October like the federal or there's
I think they're
January?
July.
Are they July?
Yeah,
Okay, so they're July, the Fed's October and we're November.
I
so-
know it's crazy, but
Got it.
trying to keep up with all that. But yeah, we're getting close. We still got some right of way issues to get, just easements. So that will probably be the push as to whether or not we get a bid this year or not. So we'll see how that turns out.
Rick or Chuck, what's the difference between the two? As far as the, First and Bridge Street roundabout, 50% engineering, First and Bridge Street roundabout engineering, and we combined them, but what was the difference between those two?
We were both looking at each other wondering why we had separate lines on that.
Okay.
There was a very little tiny amount in that second line item for engineering. We weren't sure if we were trying to isolate something that was happening at the time,
Somebody forgot.
but
to
at this
update the
point,
chart.
it made zero sense.
Somebody
not
forgot to
to
delete the line
consolidate.
in Excel after they put 50%.
Okay.
Probably was 50 and
With multiple funds funding multiple projects in different
Yeah.
places and changes on those, I think that's where that got lost.
Yeah,
typo.
yeah.
Okay, but at the end of the day, we're still paying, the money, what we pay and what we're not paying is still the same, the percentage, right? Doesn't matter, right? Okay,
Well, that cost
For all
did
of them combined,
increase.
right.
That did increase,
right.
so.
The
Right,
percentage match,
right.
it stayed the same,
Percentages
okay.
are the same.
Okay, thank you.
And there are a couple projects on here that you'll see that percentages might go up to 90%. We have a couple projects, smaller amounts that are coming out of the general fund at this point. So those aren't being shown right now out of the general fund, but there's a couple projects that you might see at 90%
Okay,
and then 10% coming out of the general fund.
And Chuck was just reappointed to the Mark Committee to fight for these. So,
good.
he's got a reputation now of when Kansas City or somebody else says, well, we can't do that project right now. He says, great, give us the money then because we can. So they don't always love Chuck being in the room.
Value of having the engineering done and projects on the shelf already.
Yep, it is. It really is. There's been a lot of projects that they asked for money for and they decided they can't move forward and somebody else has got to end up with it. And sometimes that's us. Yep.
All right, just moving on to the next slide. This cash flow is something we showed at the 25 budget discussions, that original one. I know these are pretty convoluted here, so let's kind of break this apart. So looking at the green line, that is your revenue. We have kind of a constant revenue stream projected for this fund. And then the blue is the ending balance in that fund. And then if you look at the next two lines together, you're looking at the expense line, which is red, and a reimbursement line, which is that pink/purple, depending if you're colorblind like me. So those two lines should fall kind of in line with each other. And so you can kind of see here from our original to our updated cash flow, we are projected to do a little bit better as far as projects go. A lot of our projects, you can see, kind of got pushed out as we just discussed. So you're seeing some of those expenses get pushed out 26, 27. But as of right now, and this goes back to one of my first comments on the first slide, when you're working with these, this is a very, very fluid process. So Chuck and I are analyzing this at least every other week, formally and informally every week.
Yeah, and just because the project's budgeted to be done in October doesn't mean we get billed in October always. And just because the money's sitting in the bank doesn't mean we can spend it twice because that's how you go bankrupt.
Yep.
So got to keep the money in the bank until it's time to pay the bill.
All right, looking at this, the transportation sales tax project that we have slated for the next 5 years, here's where you'll see that other 50% for the First and Bridge roundabout. The engineering costs also increased. We had 137, that basically tells me we had 37 in that second line, Ron, that you were looking at, asking about. We probably had 37 in there, 37,000. So this increased from 137 to 220. And this is the other 50%.
Chuck, we're still on target for sidewalks as soon as school gets out for commercial
Yes,
street.
on commercial,
Yeah.
yes. The
Easements are
plan
all
is, June 1st is when, whatever the Monday is after
Okay.
the 31st. Yes, that's when we are planning on proceeding. And you might note on this too, Richardson Street and 180th Street, we don't have any additional funding at this point yet. But
For the traffic signal.
yeah, for the traffic signal from MoDOT.
Yeah.
So I am talking with BG tomorrow, actually, about getting together and getting an estimate and working through that MoDOT process and seeing about getting that cost share, going, so.
I mean, it even took a little while on Marketplace, Jack, right? I mean, it took us, even when he had the money to pay for the light at Marketplace, it still took some time, so. We get it. I mean, even if we got the go-ahead today, it still wouldn't be constructed until 26.
Probably.
I do also want to highlight the 26 budget. If you notice on both the overlay program and the sidewalk replacement program, we have additional funds in there kind of as a catch up or get ahead.
Yeah.
That is actually for a certain.
That is for certain projects.
Before-
Yeah, sorry, it
Because
is.
we're
You're right.
pretty bad
That's
shape.
right. Yep.
But also we've got Anthony and his super pothole machine, so he can start filling a little more.
We're hoping that Anthony will be able to get in there sometime this year and maybe take care of some of the curb issues and some of the sidewalk
Is
issues.
Forest Oaks mostly concrete or asphalt?
Asphalt. There is a section that's concrete, but it's mostly the asphalt, the storm sewers, the sidewalks, the curb. There's some bad areas. It needs a lot of work.
Gotcha.
I'm going to jump in and put in a little plug also at our work session on the 20th. We'll be talking about the budget, the operating budget. And one of the things that we have in there, and we talked about this briefly at the retreat, but coming up with a program for PCI, the Pavement Condition Index. Currently, we do that manually, for lack of a better term. I mean, somebody goes out and looks at those and makes a subjective analysis of the condition of all those roads. And that's what helps us rate and put into the CIP, the priority for the projects. PCI software would help provide objective analysis of those roads and help us then either reinforce the way that we've analyzed those or help us look at that more objectively. We've talked about this before, and I think the mayor said at the retreat, you know, sometimes the roads that are in the worst condition aren't going to get funded because they are beyond repair. So that's one of the things that is hard to understand, but there's such a cost to that it's
Sometimes
It's
there's
cost
everything under
prohibitive
it's
to fix
bad.
it.
We got to tear the whole thing up, like what,
right.
First Street Terrace. We had to
exactly.
everything sewer line, everything was bad, so we had to replace the
You
whole
get
thing
in,
with
you have to,
concrete.
yeah, so it all becomes, there's an art and a science to this, but it also, you know, a lot of things come into consideration on that, including traffic levels.
Well, just let the guys know that are doing the OK Trail. If they got extra concrete, there's probably a few concrete holes they can fill in Diamond Crest or over there. Sidewalks.
We try to take into account when we're doing these areas, any other infrastructure like water or sewer.
Yeah.
That need to be fixed. So that's why Fourth Terrace got done, because Dave tore up all the road with the utilities.
Was there even any sewer left over there, or was it just paper and?
Sewer was all right, but water was not.
Oh, okay.
Sewer wasn't very good either.
It was Orangeburg, wasn't it? Still over there.
No, it's clay.
Oh, fun.
Anyway.
But it was like
We could be
150
here
foot
all
service
night
line.
Talking about this.
That's what we want to talk about, Chuck. We want to talk about sewer lines. Streets.
All right, just
Can we
looking
not
at,
put sewer lines under streets, then we don't have to dig them up. Time machine, build a time machine and don't bury them under the streets.
We have recently some of our development.
It goes behind it, right?
We have discussed with developers about in the back or on the sides, and we've made some progress. Not all, not everyone can work that way, but not under the street. They can be behind the curb. And they have,
And not 4 inches down with zero fall.
right. So we've made some progress. Okay.
How much, 4 inches of fall in 100 feet doesn't flow very well? Yeah. Or putting gas lines under streets too. We've had that problem. The wipes don't move. Wipes don't go in the toilet, if you haven't heard. Tony, can you repeat it?
All right.
Wipes.
We're looking at the cash flow for the transportation sales tax. Very, very slight change that you see here in 2025. Again, that's kind of looking at the expense on that engineering that was increased. And then obviously that decreases our ending balance going forward just a little bit. But this cash flow for transportation sales tax mimics what we originally had budgeted for the most part.
And that fund doesn't have a reserve, right?
Just
Yeah,
gonna
the
say as a
special
reminder,
sales tax funds
Yeah,
do
we
not
can-
have a
Correct.
reserve.
The goal is to spend it because we're collecting it to improve the roads and transportation stuff, so we spend it.
the only thing that would be the exception is the next one we're gonna talk about is Parks and Recreation sales tax.
Yeah.
And we're trying to save some money for a larger project.
Self-imposed.
So it's a self-imposed.
Self-imposed
And you'll
savings.
see that, yeah. And we're
But
gonna talk
again,
about that.
We don't collect taxes just to leave it in the bank and collect interest.
No.
All right, looking at the parks and stormwater sales tax projects, the two that I have highlighted there, we have the Riverwalk and Trail, which we've talked about already. We are moving from 25 to 26. And then we have moved up the Smiths Fork Park Complex Engineering. We had 640,000 in 27 originally. To get this larger project that is very complex going, we are having discussions of starting in 26. And I can kind of let Matt chime in here just a little bit.
Yeah, as Cynthia mentioned, we've been doing a self-imposed savings. So when the Parks and Recreation Master Plan was completed, we decided to put $300,000 in savings over the next few years so that we could meet that 2028 goal of getting close to the $2.2 million that at the time in 2020 was predicted for that project. As Rick and Chuck have been talking about, costs have been going up significantly on projects. And the worry is that I have is if we don't review and revise this project, that it could be too large of a cost that we won't have the cash for. Now, with seeing some other projects around the area that have been similar, the cost probably is going to be over that $2.2 million that we are projecting to have saved. And so the goal would be during that engineering and review of that to come up with alternative plans to look at phasing the project or as Chuck has kind of brought to our attention, a design build, which could save some money too. And if he wanted to talk more on that, he could. But this definitely probably would have to come to further discussion as a group of kind of what our plan would be. But to get started would to bring that engineering up and start that process. That way we can get as much information as possible to you all to make those decisions ahead of time.
And
One of the, yeah, you're
I
gonna,
might jump in. So typically, we hire an engineer, they spend a long time doing an evaluation and they come up with a plan and we put it out to bid and we pick the lowest bid. There's been a big movement and there's a lot of there's pros and cons, but on bigger projects like this, there are a lot of pros to a design build option or a construction manager at risk option, where it's really a team between the city and the contractor, or the city and a construction manager and the contractor. A construction manager at risk, he would basically we put out what we want and the contractor and construction manager develop the project and there's give and take. And engineers are involved, engineers, architects are always involved. But they're a team and we're a team and instead of the engineers, and we end up with this on some of our projects, the engineer puts out, a real good example is when we do a big road project, the plans, let's say they're 50 pages. 20 of those pages are traffic control. And the contractor basically comes in with his own ideas. And we've spent all this money for design and for an engineer to look at traffic control. And the contractor comes in with how he's going to do the project, and it changes everything. Um, whereas with a design build, you would sit down, the contractor would say up front, this is how the project should get done. And we don't have to have spend all this money on engineering for a plan that we're not even gonna follow. When we did Quincy, we had a lot of changes to the water line plan because, the engineer and the surveyors go out and they get the best information they can, but that's not what's in the field a lot of the time, and we find that out. And I mean, we jumped from one side of that road to the other side of the road, and the contractor just worked with us, and we went out there and we said, "This is where we want to go," and we just worked with the contractor that way. Um, so a design build option is an option. I think there's other options that we should explore at least up front. And if you look at trying to do this in 26, start it. We can sure do that. And it would be an RFQ process. You would select your team that you want to work with. They'll bring you in, their ideas. You'll select the team, and then you'll develop the project and develop the cost. They can bring all kinds of materials that we don't think about, and it's just another way to look at a project. And for bigger projects, sometimes that works out. So we just have to do some evaluation on it.
Yeah, the ultimate goal is to update these facilities and not prolong this project because the facilities that are within this project need to be updated, and prolonging them longer only affects kind of what we're talking about on kind of wastewater and water funds. It's just they're falling apart and need to be updated. As well as programs are growing significantly over the past 5 years. We've seen just more participation overall. Obviously, that comes with population, but families are moving here and they're looking to be involved in that stuff. So.
Matt, a question maybe for you and maybe for Chuck too. So on the engineering design of over 2 years, 640,000. I mean, is there? And I think you touched a little bit on this, Matt. Is there opportunity for us to instead of designing and engineering the entire project, to do a piece of it as far as like build a ballpark and then in 5 years build another ballpark or whatever we're doing? But I mean, instead of just because like you mentioned, prices are going up, right? So if we could build something, well, they're now prices, so they're not, I don't know. I'm sure you guys have looked at that.
Yeah, that would be hopefully what we would get out of the engineering design is then to find those costs of where we work as a group here to figure out the phasing of that based on what revenue we have in.
And ball fields might be a bad example because if you look at the design of Smith's Fork, if we build one ball field, we kind of destroy two because we're kind of flipping the fields. And it'd be very difficult to only build one of the four because you're overlaying other things.
Yeah, and kind of as a review, it's a good point. The reason why the Smith's Fork project is where it is because we need to complete Smith's Fork before we do any projects at Heritage Park, which is the long-term plan of a more community extension of downtown. So as we said, programs are growing. So right now we use all 5 fields for practices and almost for games for T-ball. So taking that away only just affects.
Yeah, in 17, they pulled out a field, 16, 17? 16. They ripped out, the Parks Board made the decision to rip out the baseball field so they could expand soccer, but they didn't have the money to do soccer, so we just lost a field, and it's been 10 years now, we still don't have a new baseball field. Because we can't just fit one soccer field where a baseball field, it doesn't work, so. Smith's Fork also is core land, so going to them with plans every year for approval might get a little dicey too. So if we can give them a good package, it might help.
Right.
Yeah, hopefully bring in those professionals to really
Yeah.
give us a good idea of those construction plans of what will be best. So kind of an
And
overview.
we do have a few people in the community that like to come in mid-project and provide their
Yeah.
input.
But we don't want to hit a snafu or something like that where this project is prolonged for another 2 years, because that doesn't help us at all. So hopefully if we do have the funds, as you can see there, moving this up just gets us started.
Yeah, at that point, we've been collecting and saving funds for almost 8 years to build this one, so I think getting the engineering done sooner will be helpful, and design build will be helpful.
Only gonna get more expensive every year we put it out.
Pavement and concrete's not getting any cheaper. What's cost more right now, asphalt or concrete?
About the same, isn't it?
I think asphalt's cheaper right now.
Is it?
Yeah.
It did pass it for a minute, but
A couple years ago, they were like dead even.
yeah, because oil prices went up.
Yeah, but I think oil prices have come down.
Okay, that's good.
All right, moving on to the last slide here is the cash flow for Parks and Stormwater. Again, kind of mimicking our budget, except in 2026, we see the expense increase because of the two projects that one moved to 26 and one was split and moved back to 26. So we increased that expense in 2026 by just over 900,000.
Matt, I do appreciate you guys doing what you can do with what we've got. I know you've crack sealed and fixed the tennis courts to do pickleball and some other things, so.
Yeah,
I know you're trying, and you've drug the field 1,000 times to get the glass out of from the demolition derby, but
Yeah.
it's still there.
we met with Anthony and Tony to look at some more crack sealing because the tennis courts are getting worse as each year goes on. So
Probably not flowable fill underneath it, Chuck. Probably didn't compact it right.
it's been probably over. Yeah, they did an overlay back in 2008, so we're hitting the lifespan of that asphalt of if it wasn't done properly. So
Well,
that's why the sport courts we do have are concrete with rebar through them and just prolonging that stuff. So.
cool.
All right, that wraps up our portion of the presentation. Is there any questions that you guys have over anything? Questions, comments, suggestions?
We can spend
I don't
2
have
more
any
hours talking
additional.
about sump pumps and stormwater, Chuck.
Well, here's the mic, Chuck.
We are gonna have some storms, so we may see the need to talk about that more.
Yeah, I think that's one thing we probably need to add into our future capital improvement is getting those final sump pumps off our system. I know there's not a ton of them, but I know some of the communities are working on that. And then stormwater, continue to push on it. I mean,
We were just
I've seen the street sweeper a lot, but
talking today with GBA about the size of storm sewer that's gonna be needed for that roundabout and what we've got, and it's like, are you kidding? So we'll try to value engineer that a little bit.
yeah, whatever gets the water out of Humphrey and Nancy Smith Park, so Matt can put some playground equipment there sometime. Speaking of, Matt, there's like 30 kids at Emerald Ridge like every day. It's great.
That's nice.
And they're walking there, and then they're not driving. It's all good.
Rick, what was the big jump in 2026 on the for the updated cash flow? The big jump up?
For the Parks and Stormwater?
Yeah, it's more than that. Yeah, for the park.
It's the one engineering for Smith's Fork that
Right.
we split. It's 320.
Right.
And then the other one was the project that
the-
we moved.
The Riverwalk.
forward. Riverwalk and
moved
Trail,
back.
that was 600.
Okay, move back. Okay.
So that's just over 900,000 with that jump.
And when we did Parks and Stormwater sales tax, it has a sunset, correct?
Yes, transportation is the only one without.
okay.
Yes, I had to think about that for a second.
So Also too, looking at the Parks and Stormwater, Jack had worked with the developer of Clay Creek that you guys will see on May 6th, that he was able to allow us to get the parking lot with zero funds coming out of the Parks and Stormwater, because we were expecting to have to come to you all with, to look at getting those funds out, so.
So on the agenda for next week will be an agreement with the developer that the funds that had been allocated for their contribution to parks and in lieu of fee
Yeah, but live.
will be dedicated to the parking lot. And I think, Matt, you and I had some discussions today also that would be informative and interesting to a certain alderman that lives
Yeah.
near that park.
Yeah, we did get some shade ordered for all 3 picnic tables, so hopefully we'll be up and running here soon.
So making,
Oh, when the splash park opens, there will be.
yeah,
Do
Trying to
we,
make-
is the bathroom back open yet? up
Yep,
there?
bathroom's open.
The one downtown refixed or
Yep,
still?
everything's open.
Please quit vandalizing the bathrooms, people.
Do we put cameras up down here?
We won't
Working on
discuss our
getting that.
security plan.
Okay.
Isn't that what the school district always says? We're not gonna discuss our security plan in public. Matt's observing and reporting.
So, and we
working with law
also,
enforcement.
Matt and I have had these conversations as well. We know, as we had the ribbon cutting on Emerald Ridge, that included, then we finished off that park and there's a stone there. We've gone to boulders kind of outlining the parks. In the future, we'll be having some discussions about the park, up near Diamond Crest and, the Clay Creek, naming that park and being able to put a boulder in place on that. So we'll be working with the park board on that as well. Other discussion on this? I just wanted to thank staff for all the work that they did in pulling together this information as well as all the information we reviewed at the retreat. Thanks to the board for hanging in and pushing through. We got a lot of information. Staff is putting together a series of work sessions over the next several months, both budget related and in general. And you will see those starting to show up on the planning calendar. Our next budget discussion will be on May 20th when Rick presents the 6-month budget review, where we'll see where we are in this year. And then departments, we kicked off work today on putting together information to bring to you all for the 26 budget on a departmental basis. So we're going to change format just a little bit, provide you guys some information on how the budget compares to this year's budget, and then really looking at kind of some decision packages, and we're looking for some input from you all. And then through the summer, we'll have a series of work sessions, whether it's discussion of funding requests that we've received, staffing needs, compensation and benefits, some discussion on potential activities, World Cup activities and the like, and what funding needs to be, how that funding needs to be allocated. We will have additional discussion of the CIP later in the year, but this is our biggest piece of that discussion right now. So we look forward to budget season. Woohoo.
Can you have all your guys get us some more videos? We'd like to see that pothole stuff in progress and the jetter and all this equipment we buy. We just want to see what it's used for. So Dave, you want to pop out your phone next time we got a nice sewer leak and let people see why it takes so long to dig that hole up? That'd be great. We need video, Chuck.
Well, okay, take it to the
Video.
next level. We got it. Woo, okay.
Need some HD
Well, I see some
sewer leak video.
opportunities for some social media then too.
I just want it for these presentations. So
Well, these are great too, but
when we want to
yeah.
spend money, when we spend money on filling potholes,
Pothole podcast.
there you go.
Do not give Chuck a microphone.
Just run this camera down with the jetter and just get some live video and stream it. Stream the stream.
Okay, so
I want a 24-hour live stream of the our new all the sewer decanters and everything. I want to be able to check on it all the time, make sure it's bubbling. Microbes are all working.
I think it's
on
time to
a
move for
on a
adjournment.
lighter.
Check us.
I just want to let you know, Anthony, our new street superintendent, has returned. He
Yay.
was ill for a while, and yeah, he's
Okay.
back in the saddle and he's as energetic as he was. And so, yeah, we'll get you some videos.
Yeah, it'll be entertaining. All right, what'd you say? Motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Do we have a second?
Mayor, I'll second.
All those in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
All
Aye.
opposed, say no. Stand adjourned. Have a good evening. Micro.